Welcome to Connecting with Coincidence with psychiatrist Bernard David Beitman, MD. Dr. Beitman is the founder of the Coincidence Project. The project encourages people like you to tell each other coincidence stories. To learn more about Dr. Beitman's work, put Connecting with Coincidence in your web browser. You'll find his book, his Psychology Today blog, and the interviews from this podcast. And now your host, Bernard Beitman, MD.
Welcome to Connecting with Coincidence. I am your host, Bernard Beitman, MD. I'm a psychiatrist, and I study the brain and the mind. Now, how are they connected to each other? Aren't they? I mean, it is an age-old problem about how mind and brain are connected to each other. I mean, you think something and then your brain does something that allows you to talk. And then something comes into your brain and your mind picks it up. So there's a lot of different ideas about how mind and brain interact with each other. And one place that you can get an opinion about it is in my new book, which is called Meaningful Coincidences. How and why synchronicity and serendipity happen, and you can pre-order it. One of the links below if you're on Zoom, and you can find a chapter that tries to talk about the psychosphere and particularly how mind and brain interact with each other. And the bottom line of it is that brain and mind may be of the same kinds of qualities, but different densities. Now, let that one sink into your mind for a little bit. Part of what I'm doing with Connecting with Coincidence and this book, Meaningful Coincidence, is to try to encourage you, and many of you are, who are our regular listeners and viewers, to pay attention to meaningful coincidences. They're happening quite often in everyday life, and they can be useful. And how you use them and how to explain them is part of the fun of it. And that's part of what the Coincidence Project, which I founded and which is currently just made it into being a nonprofit in the state of Virginia, is trying to be able to encourage people to do. Tell each other your stories, as our guest today, Christine Clawley, will do with me today. So here's my story. Dancing, and I'll title it Dancing into the Movies. One day at dance, and I go to dance twice a week when I can, which is as often as they have them, I was involved with a meta-coincidence. Meta-coincidence is a coincidence about coincidences. They're kind of like fun if you like to be meta. And some people call me a metaphysician because I do a lot of meta-thinking. This coincidence involved a time when I just finished a sentence, waiting around outside in the office while people were dancing. I was talking to a new dance friend named Elle, and she was telling me a story that was quite remarkable for her. It was a coincidence, she was telling me. Her yoga teacher had made a statement about something, but didn't remember, but it was a statement about a poem, and Elle wanted to know how the poem ended before she walked into the yoga teacher's class, and the yoga teacher told Elle the end of that poem. Well, Elle told me that story, and I thought it was very interesting, but she was surprised when I provided that last line of the poem. Because the day before, someone at a local food store had told me about a friend of hers who had this coincidence happen to her. It turned out that Elle and this guy were friends with each other, but I didn't know that. So this coincidence about a coincidence was fascinating to me. And it just happened that there was a person from out of town, a filmmaker, who was coming to my house in 2 days from then. And I needed somebody to help me do the movie, and it was going to be a movie about coincidences. So I asked Elle to come with me, and now that conversation, the story I just started to tell you, is on film, and also with Elle and me dancing, which she's a great dancer. I really enjoyed dancing with her. So these are on this film that I'm glad to be able to say is in progress and is being made by our guest. Our guest is Christine Clawley. Christine is a therapist in Tucson, Arizona, and has had a lot of experiences that have brought her to her understanding of coincidences. Part of that understanding has come through experiences that are quite remarkable, and she, I believe, will tell us one of her stories, which is recorded in my book, and that story comes after a time when she was overcoming a life-threatening disease, necrotizing fasciitis, in 2008. From this journey, she embarked on her own journey of healing and self-understanding through exploring various modalities and techniques, and wishes to share what she learned with others and assist in their healing. Probably one of the most important takeaways from Christine's experience is that illness is not only something that slams you and takes you out of the flow of life, but it's something that when you push yourself through it and believe that there's something going to happen that's positive, you transform your whole body, your energy body, your mind, your brain transform in a possibly positive way. And if that's what's happened to Christine. Prior to contracting this illness, she received many dreams and messages that something was out of balance within her life and body, and eventually foreshadowed this illness. She spent about a month suspended in medically-induced coma, during which time she had many dreams, and boy, is she into dreams, that mirrored what happened to her on a physical, emotional, and spiritual level. Christine, thank you for coming on to the show, and it's great to see you again.
So good to see you, Dr. Coincidence, and thank you for having me on the show.
You're welcome, and you know how much I like being called Dr. Coincidence. But we have to see your movie. What's the name of your movie going to be?
So, so far, this may change. It's called The Tapestry of Time, and the production company is called Circling Hawk Productions. And we have been working on this for almost 6 years. So it is taking a while, and it's challenged my patience, but things are unfolding in just the right way. And we hope to have it out within the next 6 months to a year.
Oh, it's getting there.
It's getting there.
It's getting there. Well, I have personal reasons for looking forward to seeing it, but you interviewed a bunch of people that I know on this thing. That's how you got to me. So tell us the name of it again, and then we're going to ask you a coincidence story.
Sure. It's called The Tapestry of Time.
The Tapestry of Time. Reminds me of a dance. Tap, 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 tapping, tapping, tapestry, tapestry, time, time, tapestry. It's got a rhythm to it, and I'm looking forward to hearing it, or seeing it. So
cool.
Tell us a coincidence story, Christine.
Okay. Well, I will start with the one that's featured in your book. And the reason I focus on some synchronicities like these is because many times people might dismiss a synchronicity. Well, it doesn't really matter. It's not important. Why pay attention? And this and some other powerful stories that I've collected over the years really demonstrate the life-saving potential of synchronicities and paying attention, not dismissing that feeling, that intuition, but really being alert and awake to the universe around you. So this story involves my father, so someone I love very dearly and who's been a big, big influence on my life and who I am today. And it starts with, I was visiting a good friend in California, had just kind of wrapped up a wonderful trip. We were spending some time at the bookstore before I was going to get on a flight going back to Denver. And I just felt this book kind of calling to me, if you will. I know this may sound odd, but it just felt like there was a glow around this book. And I have a habit of collecting a lot of books. So I'm kind of rational, logical minds going, you know, you don't need any more, just, you know, resist the urge. But I couldn't. I listened to that gut feeling, that intuition. I grabbed the book and opened it up on the plane and was just, you know, reading, really into it. I love reading on planes because it's really the time you have uninterrupted to just concentrate, which is becoming harder and harder these days. So I'm reading the book and I get to this chapter and I just have this internal kind of voice or internal feeling, just close the book and sit with the information you just read in this chapter. And in this book, the author was talking about a life-saving synchronicity. He had been having some sensations of having burning lungs. And his wife, you know, he was dismissing it, you know, as something pretty minor, but then mentioned it to his wife, and his wife had just made this comment or noticed that on the box of cereal that they had, it was saying burning lungs can be a symptom of a heart attack. Now, that's not a very well-known indication of heart attack, so that is a bit, you know, unusual. And so this ended up saving his life. He ended up having, you know, to go to the hospital, and it was absolutely life-saving. And he was reflecting on this. And my father was picking me up from the airport. I had just read this book, and then, you know, he's picking me up, and he's complaining about my lungs are burning. You know, my lungs are burning. He's not looking very well, and I can see that he's struggling, but doesn't want, you know, like most men, oh, I'm okay, I'm fine. He did ask me to drive, but I had told him, you know, it's so odd because I just read this about 45 minutes ago that burning lungs can mean you're having a heart attack. Oh no, it's just the pollution in Denver. You know, they're from Colorado Springs, which is really beautiful and has a little less pollution. So he was a bit paranoid about that. And I overrid his wishes to just take him home to Colorado Springs, and, you know, followed my gut intuition and took him to the closest ER just to get him checked out. And oftentimes, as you know, this can happen when someone's going to an ER, may not be taken seriously at first, but they ran some tests and, you know, it was very life-threatening. They found out one of his arteries was 99% clogged. They had to do surgery, you know, very quickly the same day. And that was life-saving, because had we continued and driven to the Springs, I'm not sure that he would have made that or made it. So that was really profound. And you know, you look at how we normally think of the world in the terms of causality, you know, A causes B. But in this situation, it's like the right information just fell into my lap. And if I had not had that information, I would have probably listened to my father. He's my father. He's very stubborn, you know, and I might seem like I'm overreacting, but I listened to it. And without that information, the outcome could have been very different. Yeah.
You know, when I hear the story again, it's a meta coincidence, because the first coincidence led to the second coincidence. And my favorite versions are where the first coincidence is a comment on the second coincidence. And that's what you just had. So there's just the fun of being meta that I do this with, but it's still a meta thing. So I think there's something to this meta things, meta coincidence thing, but I don't know what it is yet. And I have other examples in meaningful coincidence book, but that's less important now, because your story in my book is the first one of 6 puzzling coincidences. The last one is, you may remember, look up in the sky, the sun and the moon, 93 million miles apart. But from where we stand, they look to be exactly the same size. What a coincidence. What a coincidence. That's the last one. That's a hard one to figure out, that one. But yours, how do you understand what happened in this with you and your father? What's the way you think about it now?
You know, since I've had these experiences, and my experiences have really gone back to, 2007, 2008, where I was having synchronicities and dreams foreshadowing my illness. And so this is very personal for me, as it is for you. And I've been on a mission to really understand what is this about? Obviously there's something more to this, mechanical universe that we're kind of being taught, and scientific materialism is not an adequate, explanation. So just like you, Bernie, it's, we can feel there's something more when we pay attention, when we engage the universe, we get feedback. And so I've loved doing this documentary because I get to collect stories and interview experts in the field, doctors, psychiatrists, researchers, artists, and it's unbelievable. I do believe we are in a huge paradigm shift and experiencing some kind of awakening here, where we're realizing the way we've been living and these values no longer work. And in fact, there may have been negative, distressing consequences from being so focused on the left brain, rational, logical, sequential cause and effect way of looking at the world. And the more intuitive, emotional, feeling, meaningful way of interacting, being in the world, it's a call to come back to that. That's what I see. And for some of us, it takes a close brush with death, or maybe losing a family member, to reconsider these values. So that was really, an initiation, an awakening for me, to realize, wow, I really don't know much about the world, and these experiences are happening. I'm having precognitive dreams, or kind of synchronicities, or waking visions, you can even call them, and they actually correspond to reality. And more than that, they can actually be incredibly helpful, life-saving, and they bring magic back to life. So it's really important for me, and I'm still, I still haven't made up my mind about, one theory, but I think that's why the video will be so interesting, because there's all these experts presenting their own different theories, and it's exciting. Yeah.
Re-enchanting the world, and you're helping do that. And the funny thing is, we call it enchantment because we don't really understand it, because it seems magical, but it's got rules and laws and ways of understanding it. And that's why I'm in it. I've grown up saying, they ain't telling me something. And I like to say I went to some of America's finest schools, like Swarthmore College, Yale Medical School, and Stanford, and they didn't tell me something. There was something else going on around here that they didn't tell me in class, and you got to do it this other way. And you're doing it, going around talking to people about, talking with people about the different ideas. I don't know if you need caution about this, but I'd suggest that it's not one cause at all with coincidences. That's a problem when I hear you say that, even though I don't think you think that. But it's important to be able to recognize that probability plays a role. So there's a chance element to all coincidences so they have a probability. But it's like saying It's like, okay, everybody has a mother, so the mother is a cause of all your problems. I don't think so. My mother
Good.
I don't think so, Mom. You had a good impact on me, but there's other things going on around. How about your husband? And then there's my brother. So, but there's other things going on too. If it's not one cause, but probability plays a role, and mystery, which people call God and universe, or universe and other things, or well, there's other names for it, but all one a unified field, which I can talk a bit about. But there are we don't know. It's like the way the theory of light was before we got to our current understanding. A lot of different possibilities. For light, there's one way of thinking about them. For coincidences, it's still multiply factorial, multiple influences, which include mystery, probability, and Christine has something to do with making them happen. Just, yeah, you, little old you. Who would have thought of that? It ain't something else, but you're playing a role in it too. So we might get to some of that. So you want to tell us, I try to go through what I think happened with your father, but we can leave that, your father and you, but and it has to do with love and connection in the psychosphere, so that you could feel what he was feeling at a distance and found the thing that you needed to find that would help him without knowing consciously, but intuitively you could pick it up. And that's that simple way of thinking about it for me. And love has a lot to do with how these things happen, but not the only thing. So you want to tell us some more coincidence stories, and I don't know if you want to do that guy you're doing dreaming thing with, or you want to do Donnie Darko, or you tell me.
Sure. Let me think where to start. So there was something more I was going to say. Oh, yes. I just wanted to respond to what you said. I love what you said about there not being one cause. I think you're really right about that. And the tendency is to maybe oversimplify or take literally maybe a synchronicity or these experiences. And there is something really symbolic about, these experiences, synchronicities, dreams, and it's challenging us to think about reality in a bigger way. And one thing that I've been really excited about is a collaborative project where I think this individual shall remain anonymous, but we are co-collaborating and creating some of these synchronicities and markers. And so Eric Wargo actually features a lot of her work in precognitive dream work and the long self. And I'm a huge fan of Eric Wargo's work and some of his theories about time. So I think there is something related to time in these experiences. And he's even coined a term called calendrical resonance, which is, and I challenge the audience or even you, Bernie, to think about important dates. So this might be, birthdays. For me, my near-death experience, every year I celebrate the day I should have died and the day, I left the hospital, because those are key dates for me. And so with this individual, when she initially reached out to me, she sent me a date that she had a very big dream that symbolizes her life work. And in that dream, there were direct connections to me, very, very personal things that she would never have known about, things I don't speak openly about. And that really began our collaboration. And so for the past year, we've been going through dates. We've been kind of, experimenting with, noting different things that happen, things that are unusual, emailing them back and forth with one another. And the results have just been amazing. And on one more, I can provide a few examples of this without giving too much away. But one thing we found out through our collaboration, and again, we're strangers, we live in different states, but she ended up, she attended CU Boulder, which is where I got my undergraduate degree. 20 years earlier than I did. And she ended up living right next door to the home that I lived in when I had my illness. I almost died. Very profound experience. And through our analysis of the dreams, she was having dreams about me. Not only that experience, but who I become in the future. I'm a counselor now. I was dreaming about past events that occurred in that home, fire that occurred 20 years prior that I had no idea about. And so does seem to be maybe something with not only going forward and backward in time, but perhaps proximity, location, and then, as you so eloquently mentioned before, having that kind of care, that kind of love and connection that transcends space and time. So even though, again, when we met, we were strangers, there was a feeling, and it's indicated in the dreams, just how important this collaboration is and will be in our lives. So that's one example. I'd like to give one more example involving my husband.
Oh, wait a second. Wait a second.
Oh, sure.
Wait a second. We call what you just described as far out and groovy. It's like deserves that 1960s label. There's a lot to that, and we won't be able to go through it all. But I interviewed Eric, and he's published on my website 2 weeks ago. So you could see Eric and I just doing our thing, and then another guy whose name is Adam Curry, who's very precognitive kind of guy too, and we did a precognitive experiment live, and it seemed like something happened. And now you're mentioning Eric Wargo, so the in between was a person called Natasha, and I got to play Boris for a little while, which is a very different fractal thing, mirrors and stuff, but that's a different thing. But now it's you. So there's a precognitive Eric Wargo thing going on around here. I mean, that's in just what's going on with this podcast. Okay, so that's just a little bit of an observation. But the idea that she is picking up you, that she's got your information without you telling her,
and vice versa. It goes both ways.
And versa versa. If you got to go in other direction. I've got a psychoanalyst who wrote a book with his patient, because the patient was writing a novel that turned out to feature the life of the psychoanalyst. That's not unlike what you just described, but they're in the same room together. It's not like they're a different form of proximity, because you had your almost dead thing next to her house. So there's a proximity thing that one of our coincidence colleagues calls it propinquity. There's something about being close to somebody by accident that makes something happen. And these are more dramatic examples of them. That I just love that the two of you can connect like this. I mean, to have a relationship like this is something that is a lot of like heartwarming, intellectually stimulating, mind expanding. It's so much a wonderful example of a love that is not in the usual way we think about it. It's a loving relationship, and I don't know. I'd like to have more of those, because it's such a beautiful experience for both of you.
Absolutely. And to be able to, suspend judgment and just, accept these experiences. Still, we're trying to understand how this happens and discovering it. But again, we have not even met in person yet. And she lived there in that house right next to mine 20 years. before my experience, but she had some of the most important life-defining moments for her happen in that house, and so did I. So it's fascinating. It's helped with my personal growth and development, and it's only given me more confidence
What you're
to
doing.
pursue this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like to, I believe in these places that have special vibrations in them and around them, that in the psychosphere, it's not just all a bland thing, but there are places like Sedona, for example, which have gotten overrun now, but it's too bad. And Charlottesville has some of it where I am. San Francisco in the late 60s, Rio
Absolutely.
had it. And it may be a shifting thing, but it makes me think that that house, those two houses, were in a vortex of some kind. There's something else going on around there. It makes me think that. We don't know it, but it's important to recognize that our mental atmosphere is not just a bland thing. There's all kinds of stuff. It's like the ocean.
Yes.
Like the ocean. There's all kinds of stuff going on around there, and it keeps changing. But this is, you had something. That's what it looks like to my intuitive Piscean mind. That there's something else going around that house.
Just adding to what you've said as well, I just want to acknowledge Indigenous peoples all over the world have always had this knowledge, this wisdom, this understanding of all things being related and connected, and this idea that we participate with Mother Nature, and we're related to all the animals and creatures and beings, and this their view of reality. I realize I'm making broad generalizations, but overall, it was a universe that was very much alive. Again, there's a sense of empowerment, of relating, and the universe that the Western mind has created with Descartes and this mind-body split is often look at the systems we live in. We treat each other like objects. We treat the earth as an object to be exploited, resources. So this will tie in with the next synchronicity I'm going to talk about, which happened last week. And I think, I've been really touched with, or not touched, alarmed by all of these shootings. And this has been such a difficult time for young people to live through. I'm a therapist in private practice, and I have children, teenagers, young adults, and to bear witness and to really be present to how the pandemic has impacted them, the political division, and then these shootings. I think, again, this is a call to attend to these kind of spiritual wounding that we have in this culture. And I'll just launch in, with this last synchronicity.
Before you go into that, I want to echo and maybe extend what you were just describing. Is that I believe that meaningful coincidences are a way of being able to help us heal. Not by us, I mean not just individually or groups, but also what I call the collective human organism. That we are a collective human organism if we recognize it, and we are connected, but it's not just enough to say we're all connected. We need to know how we're connected. We need to know what our particular role is in the whole thing, which means being able to have our thing, like a cell in a body, do that something, but also relate to the whole organism, which is the collective human organism. And I'm trying to work on defining a collective human self-observer, so that this collective human organism has a self-observer the same way that you do and I do, and that coincidences activate the ability to look at yourself. And it started for me with the pandemic being like an arc, like a reflection of the human tendency to destroy its habitat. That's what the virus is doing. is destroying its habitat, which is human beings, then we are doing that to planet Earth. And so there was a way the collective human organism can say, hey, that's happened. That's what a coincidence. Maybe it has something to do with me. And trying to be able to develop a vision collectively of what we need to do about it, not these piecemeal things, but bring them all together in a way that has a vision, because we are in a battle for human imagination.
I love that. Love what you just said. I could not have said it better. Carl Jung would have absolutely loved what you just said. That is, you know, just to sum it up, his theory of, there's a beautiful book called The Earth Has a Soul. And Carl Jung was very, very concerned about the West and the destruction of the, you know, natural relationship, that we have to nature, this over-reliance on technology. And we really are seeing, again, the consequences of that. I did want to bring up this quote. This quote from Jung: "Our intellect has created a new world that dominates nature and has populated it with monstrous machines. The latter are so indubitably useful and so much needed that we cannot even see a possibility of getting rid of them, or of our odious subservience to them. Man is bound to follow the exploits of his scientific and inventive mind and to admire himself for his splendid achievements. But at the same time, he cannot help admitting his genius shows an uncanny tendency to invent things that become more and more dangerous. In spite of our proud domination of nature, we are still her victims as much as ever and have not even learnt to control our own nature, which slowly and inevitably courts disaster." So Jung really talked about the absolute importance of dealing with the shadow, which is all that repressed fears, anger, anxiety, all those things we're unwilling to look at within ourselves, we dangerously project onto the other, and we create the enemy through this split between the persona and the shadow. And that happens with nations, with societies, it happens individually. And this is about, you know, healing and looking at those painful truths. So
well, if I ever get to it, which I hope after all this kind of coincidence project stuff and this book that's coming out and another book I had in mind it's about my coincidence diary, is like starting in when I was 9, and it's all kinds of coincidences from then on. I got them written down. I like to get that out there, but I'm starting to do a psychotherapy for the collective human organism. And you are part of it. You understand it. What you just did was like the diagnosis. Jung was like more of a theoretician. I'm like a football player. I like to get something happening. And so I'm a pragmatician. He's a theoretician. So I want to get the psychotherapy thing happening for the collective human organism.
yes, yes.
Okay, that was like a wonderful segue to what you were about to say with your husband.
Okay. Yeah. Well, actually, since we're a bit time limited, I'm gonna set that one aside. If we have time later, I'll revisit that one. But I'd like to talk about the synchronicity that happened last weekend. And it was the first concert, you know, we've attended in a long time. Last weekend, an old 80s band that I loved from my childhood, Tears for Fears. I'm not sure if you're familiar.
Yeah.
It's a wonderful show.
I haven't heard one of their songs in a long time.
They actually have a new album out, and it was pretty amazing. They did a really good job, but you know, there's that song "Everyone Wants to Rule the World."
Oh yeah.
Oh
yeah.
Yes.
yeah.
And that's such a carefree, you know, kind of universal song. Everybody is the center of their own world. Everybody, you know, does want to expand.
Everybody wants to rule the world.
But there's another song, a very kind of, you know, well, the lyrics are melancholy, but the sound, the music is upbeat. It's called Mad World. I don't know if you've heard this song. And it was later used in the cult classic film Donnie Darko. It was
Aha.
redone.
Aha.
I can't remember the name of the artist, but there was another artist who redid a version of that song that is profoundly touching and honors the lyrics and humility and just the depth of feeling in that song. So that song came on, you know, this Mad World song, incredible lyrics. I encourage everyone to look it up. And I was just reflecting on the mass shootings. I was reflecting on the culture, the greater culture that we live in, the culture in the school systems. You know, there had just been that awful shooting in Texas, and it's so easy to just rush to judge someone. It's such a horrific thing. But as a therapist and someone interested in storytelling, we have to consider that we're only looking at that person, you know, from a small slice in time. And what would their life look like if we were to expand it out? What did this individual go through? You know, what kind of bullying, abuses, other things that may have led him to take these actions, you know? And of course, I'm not condoning or excusing, but I'm saying this issue is so much deeper. It's so much more complicated than, you know, simplifying it to just, you know, this or that. So anyhow, I was reflecting as this song, you know, was being played, and then, you know, we came back home, and the next day I sat down at the computer. I was doing some video editing for my documentary, The Tapestry of Time. And I just happened to pull up, you know, one random interview. I wasn't thinking about it at all, and began listening to the whole interview again, marking off, you know, key points that I wanted to bring in. And this interview, I don't know if you're familiar with Jonathan Zapp. He's a researcher, author, who's also very interested in Jungian psychology. And I'm watching this interview. The first thing he mentions is, I just watched Donnie Darko. I just had all these synchronicities. And I watched Donnie Darko because Anthony Peake, another synchronicity author, had recommended this. So the whole interview referenced Donnie Darko, or again, this interplay between light and dark, shadow, the collective shadow that we have. And, you know, I thought, wow, that's really interesting, you know, very, very interesting. That I just happened to pick this. So, you know, you could explain that away. Maybe subconsciously, I remembered, you know, that this interview had Donnie Darko in it. But later in the evening, I take a drive down to Target. I park my car, and I look at the car in front of me, and it is the rabbit, the scary rabbit from Donnie Darko. And that's not a common symbol, you know, that people are out sporting in the world. So Bernie, I don't know if you have a picture of this even that you want to share. I think I sent it to you.
There he is.
So actual cropped photo of the rabbit from Donnie Darko, you know, very specific. So again, when you have that many synchronicities all at once, and then, you know, there's no explanation for how.
Can you see the rabbit?
Yes, yes, I can. You can even expand it if possible, or not.
Let's see, how do I expand this? I don't know how to expand. Let's see, maybe it'll go
Next
over.
to the Xbox, there's like a bigger window square. That's okay. Up at the top, there's minimize and then expand. So there's that minus. Keep going up.
Yeah.
Up,
I can't.
and then to the left, like oh,
Okay.
there we go. Well, it's not as big as it could be, but it's there.
Well,
it's evidence.
I can get it bigger.
Oh, perfect. Okay.
Oh, look at that rabbit.
I mean, that's unique. Okay. It's a unique feature of that movie. And for anyone who's a fan of the movie, and I am, even though it had been a while since I've seen it, it's it's recognizable. There's no kind of mixing it up. And so what did I do? I paid attention and I said to my partner, okay, we've got to watch this movie tonight. So we did, and I was really reflecting. So this is something, I want to read from the film. Every time you watch a film, there's always something new that you catch, or maybe you've changed a little bit, or things have happened in the world. But this time when I watched the film, it had so much more meaning. And given the climate in these schools, I think this film is really speaking to how our system and, many of the people who are trying to offer solutions in the world right now are failing. This younger generation has a set of problems that is totally different from what your generation or my generation had to go through or deal with. There's the technology, the 24/7, connectivity, the online bullying, the pandemic, the increased hostility, competition, the wealth inequality. I mean, there's so many things. And a big theme within this film is, about this desire to just oversimplify the problem, to, not be willing to, this tendency to be in denial or to not face the more difficult things in life, like death. This movie follows a young person who knows he's going to die, or who's having these visitations from this rabbit character that he's entangled with. He's getting information from the future, from this other timeline, dimension, reality, not quite making sense of it, maybe until it happens. And that's often how a precognitive experience feels, for me at least. I may have an intuition that something's about to happen. I may have a very specific dream, but every time it happens, it's always a shocking experience for me. And it does bring the feeling up that maybe we aren't in control to some degree. Maybe there is kind of a grander, larger design that I think you might have been alluding to here. And there was one quote from the movie that I just wanted to bring up. So Donnie and his girlfriend Gretchen, who are connected through difficult confrontations with life and trauma, I'll say. And they did this presentation. It was a science project about this idea that, an infant, while it's sleeping or afraid, you can put glasses on the infants that will give these positive images of beaches, sunset, to soothe the infant. And so they're putting forth this idea. They have good intentions. There we go again. And the science teacher responds, did you stop and think that maybe the infants need darkness? So again, this idea that darkness, suffering, chaos, this is a part of life that is difficult, to confront. And we live in this society that values, again, light, consciousness, rationality, dominating nature. We like to feel like we're in control of things. But the more we try to control, the more we try to oversimplify things or reject that pain, reject the shadow, the bigger it's going to be, the larger it's going to try to get your attention. And so, as a therapist, I work with dreams, I work with nightmares, and nightmares, we often look at them as a negative thing, but it's really positive because it's your subconscious trying to get your attention. It's your soul, or that deeper, wiser part of yourself saying, hey, you're not looking, you need to reconcile this, you need to deal with this. And so, in this modern era of civilization, we like to categorize things. We want to feel like, we're going to live forever. We live life in denial of death. And we imagine that this continued growth and expansion can just go on and on. But we are a society that is afraid of death. And I do believe that the pandemic could have been an incredible, and I think for some people it was an incredible spiritual opportunity to really reflect on one's own mortality, how we live life, what our values are. And collectively, this could be extremely powerful in shifting away from a very, kind of more superficial, materialistic, greedy society to a society that is more balanced, I guess I'll say. So
it's a battle going on now, Christine, because the forces of light, which is really the force of darkness, taking over politically, especially in the United States, where the idea is me, me, me. I haven't heard you mention narcissism.
Love it. Yes.
In what you're describing, kids have to deal with. Social media has really made people like me think I'm so wonderful because I get to watch myself do this. Hey, look at me! I'm on the movies now. I'm on TV. You get to do that, and think you're wonderful because you're got your headphones on and somebody's looking at you, even if it's only 3 people. It's like you can see yourself. The person, Natasha, that I mentioned, wrote this book about called "A Portrait of a Mirror," and it's so much about reflections and narcissism and endemic in this country and how it happens, and that Narcissus, with looking in his pond and falling in love with himself, is now transformed to a guy that can take the pond with him and look at himself any place. So people fall in love with their own image with social media. So that's another variable that's so important. There's so much passivity and narcissism running around out there where it's just all about me. And the kids are being infected by that, I should think, as well.
Yes, but again, I think there will be a correction, because even if you look at a child developing, children think, they're the center of the world, that it takes time to really realize, oh, if I do that, that hurts this person, or this animal has feelings. This may be a stage of development for human beings to expand their awareness, and empathy is key. Empathy is everything. When I had my near-death experience, the boundaries between self and other were dissolved, and I was so much more sensitive to my own pain, to others' pain. So when we take that time to reflect, and I do think reflection is key with having synchronicities or precognitive experiences.
Absolutely.
Or dreams. And so when we take that time to be in the dark or sit with our own thoughts, look inside, it can be frightening and scary. It can feel like we're even going to die. But there's, it's like Jung's Dark Night of the Soul. Or Joseph Campbell's hero's journey. There's wisdom to be gained from going through that process. Many cultures had vision quests or these kind of rituals that helped young people really move into adulthood with that mature perspective. And I think, the leadership, the structure of society or economic system, it reflects where we're at on a mature level collectively. And so maybe we are going through a painful transition, and I have to be hopeful, and I am hopeful because there's so many, incredible people in the world. You're doing incredible work.
Thank you.
These young people are really different. I think it's hard for many of us older folks to really understand how different the world is for them, but growing up with technology, I mean, you see babies sometimes using iPads and interacting with it. So something is happening here, and there will be, I think, kind of a correction, because we live in a world with consequences. There's always,
What do you think about the gap I see between what you just said, which is so very true? There's a lot to be gained from examining the shadow, among other things. But in order to do that, as you said, you've got to be able to do something called self-reflection, or I call activating your self-observer. Now,
Beautiful.
this does not appear to be a common trait among many people. They are programmed. When I look at people, sometimes they're like puppets on the string of cultural demands or models in the culture. They follow what other people are doing. The imitative nature of desire, which you desire what other people are doing, what they're looking for, which has some value to it if you're getting they're doing the right thing. But you're talked like a therapist who has people come in ready to start thinking about themselves.
Yes.
That's what you just sounded like. And
Good point.
And being as I run around in the world sometimes, and dance is one place where I run into, it ain't the same as running around with other therapists or even in academics where people had a certain behavior, even though some of it was very self-centered, and they still were willing to look at themselves. But what's out there are people who are just doing what their robotic self and what culture is puppeteering them to do. So how do we get them to activate their self-observers?
That is a great question. And I just gave a lecture on the mental health implications of increased technology use. And there's so many good resources out there. There's Nicholas Carr is an amazing author. He's written books called The Shallows, The Glass Cage. There's wonderful documentaries out there. But this is a word of caution out there to your listeners. There may be false synchronicities through the internet because of the algorithms.
Yes,
yes. Filter bubbles, which involves, the confirmation biases. We seek out information that we already have or we already believe. So it creates this feedback loop and it begins to isolate and insulate the individual more and more. We're becoming less patient. We're all about like instant gratification. We're becoming more shallow. We're losing our social skills. Nicholas Carr even talks about the diversity in terms of language, the subtlety and mood. We're losing that. More and more young people are communicating just like via text message or messenger, and you can't see someone's emotional expression. You can't, get that sense of empathy as much. And another point I want to make is it's a lot easier to, say something mean or insult someone when you're doing it from the safety of your home or when you don't see their immediate feedback and expression. So I think, that's another reason why we are so polarized, not only because of the algorithms and that the news and media and Facebook are profiting off of keeping us in emotions like anger, fear, because that keeps you going back, that keeps you engaging in the platform. But it also, again, stops us from just talking with one another. I was talking with one of my elders who's been a spiritual mentor for me. And I asked him, have you ever seen it so divided before, in the country? So much anger and hostility. And he said, no, I've never seen it like this. So something is happening in the world. And I think it requires us to disengage a little bit. I'm seeing the same things you do. I walk around in my neighbor or, in the public spaces, even in the hospital where I work at times. People are not even looking up. They're just looking at their phones. No one's looking at each other. No one's saying hi or acknowledging you exist. It's just, we are letting the devices use and exploit us. We're letting our personal data being mined. We are being commodified in a very scary and kind of dangerous way. And again, it's about balance. So I think there will be a correction. I think, maybe more and more people will disengage. I think, there's a desire to come back to the simple things in life. And again, reflecting on these big issues, reflecting on death, mortality. You know, I practice this in my own life. After going through near-death experience, I live each day just thanking you for, you know, thanking the universe for my life, for being here. And I try to think beyond myself. And I also think about how can I live aligned with my values? How can I leave this world maybe a little bit better here, you know, when I'm gone? Because it's important. It's important to reflect on these things. And even though they're scary, it gives meaning. It gives meaning to life, to our actions, because we live in a world that exploits us and profits off of making us feel like we don't have power, like we don't matter, like we don't have choices. And so the more we can move into a place of embodiment, empowerment, connection, social connection, connection to ourselves, community, that is just really powerful. And connecting with the earth, being aware of what we're doing, of how we're living, what we're creating on this planet, because we are incredible beings. You and I both know that we are powerful. Somehow, you know, we can create these magical experiences, or we can interact with the world in this way. So allowing this hidden knowledge to really come out, you know, and be practiced and honored in daily life, I think is key to our healing and our survival.
Well, you're describing the vision very, very eloquently, Christine, of what we've got to be doing. When I say we're in a battle for human imagination, we're in a battle for imagining what you just described. We have to have people imagining a world that's like the one you just are outlining. And my problem is, you have to have a near-death experience to be able to like notice that. And a lot of people are having NDEs. I mean, there's a lot of activity going on out there all over the world, and they're kind of like the new Jesus sometimes, coming back from the death, is the way some people think about them, the new missionaries. And there's people doing UFO things that say, hey, you know, this thing isn't quite the way it should be. But I keep hearing stories of the interplanetary visitors are frightened of human beings because we're so violent. I mean, I've gotten that a couple of times. That we are a pernicious race of vermin, said Jonathan Swift in Gulliver's Travels. That stays with me. There's so much nastiness, and has been for a long time, in human beings. Pretty much the only ones that kill each other, and just for the fun of it, or for land or power or something. To me, it's still awareness, self-awareness. It's still self-reflection. It's still activating the self-observer. Meditation can help with that, but it's usually self-involved, not about other people. So what I like to ask my patients sometimes, and myself too, Christine, what do you think I think of you?
Oh, goodness. I don't know.
Well, you don't have to answer that
don't-
question. It's a hard question, because in answering that question, you have to think about me and how I represent you, or you have to think about me and how you represent me. And those things, those are hard things, just to get into your own mind and think about Christine, and then think about you in the specifics of how you think about me. But that's a way to begin to say we have to think about our impact on the other person.
Yeah.
And narcissism, which is endemic now, just all over the place, particularly notable among white male Christian fundamentalists, but it's also out there a lot anyway. I'm just amazed at the narcissism in some women that I run into. I didn't expect that, and it's there too. It's that, how do we get people out of their own minds to examine their own minds, so they can see their own minds, so they can develop a vision like the one you're describing, and begin to think about my mind, Wait a minute, what about this one? You got me, you got a mind, I got a mind. But maybe, and you are doing that so wonderfully with your friend that you've never met, sharing minds. And that's a form of love that I'd like to be able to expand what we mean by love instead of I love you and you love me, hiding above the tall oak tree. Please let the moon that shines on me shine on the one I love. Well, that's a wonderful. I love romance, but it ain't the only one. And you're describing a really fine one with your friend. And keep going.
It's like agape. Remember,
It's agape.
the different types of love that are, available
Well,
to
there's a
us.
whole bunch of different kinds of loves, and it's just that's not demanding and owning. Oh, I own that's 50 songs, and even now, I own you. They're still around. That it doesn't work too well either. But anyway, we've come to the end of our cartoon here, Christine. You're very articulate in what you say.
Oh, thank you.
You're welcome. I mean, it's a pleasure to hear you get going, because you don't know you're doing it when you get going. So you're just doing your rap, man, and it's good. I mean, maybe it's from watching everybody else do it. Now you picked it up. I don't know, but you've picked up a lot. You're a good person to interview. You have a lot of good stuff coming out of you. What I want to leave you with before I ask you one final question is, how do we help activate this self-observer of the collective human organism? And I have a section of that in my book too. It's towards the end, but it's like a psychotherapy, and you're joining it. You're in it. You're in it, a psychotherapy for the collective human organism. You have just made yourself a part of that effort, just because you are part of that effort from what you're saying. So how do we do that? I'm not asking you to answer that question, but that's what we were trying to get to. But as we end, and I think of you in Tucson, Arizona, where my old friend Andrew Weil still is hanging around.
I know that.
We were interns together in San Francisco.
Oh, how neat.
1968. So we still keep a little contact. I visited him in his summer place off Vancouver Island, in a place called Cortez Island, a great place. He's done a lot since those days, that's for sure. And he's just down the street from you somewhere. The streets are pretty long in Tucson. Yes. I know that. He's somewhere around there. So I can imagine where you were. I've been there a couple of times. So tell us about you in Tucson. Tell us something more personal about Christine Clawley.
Oh, something a bit more personal. Well, I really, since my near-death experience, which involved a dream of a Native or Indigenous woman, I have been incredibly drawn to Native American spirituality and teachings. So one reason why I'm attracted to Arizona and Tucson is the history of Indigenous people. There's the Pascua Yaqui tribe, Tohono O'odham tribe here. I just want to acknowledge, we're living on their land. There's incredible history here. I want to acknowledge my teachers in California, Wolf and Lisa Wapipa. They've just led me on an incredible journey. They've been so kind to open up, these teachings, this spiritual knowledge that many people, died trying to preserve and practice. It's been incredibly healing for me. Out of everything I've done, in my life to try to heal from the physical, illness, some of the emotional traumas that I've been through, the Native American teachings and healing ceremonies have just been absolutely profound. So I just, extend my gratitude to them, to being open to including non-Native people in their ceremonies, and doing it in a way that really honors their traditions. And tying that back into what you said a moment ago, how can we begin to self-reflect and heal? I think acknowledging, the collective shadow as well, acknowledging the history of slavery, the Native American genocide, and enslavement, acknowledging, the difficult things that we've inherited in this world. That's a huge part of being spiritually mature. And again, doesn't have to be, a story of guilt and blame, but it's opening a dialogue, because you can't begin to heal if you are in denial that there's a problem, or you aren't willing to acknowledge that there's a problem or looking at it. In order to heal and solve a problem, we have to be present with it. And oftentimes, this is what I observe in therapy, that solution just naturally emerges. So having the courage, like you said, individually and collectively, to stay present with uncomfortable feelings, to not dissociate, project, blame, go into denial, but recognizing, there's a piece of everyone in the world within us. There's that kernel of the victim, both the victim and the oppressor within each one of us. So being aware of all these different parts, and, bringing in compassion, just compassion, humility for oneself. And then that extends to others.
It's still, those are all what I share very much with you, and you articulate it really wonderfully. And it's got to be said more and more often, what you're just saying there. When I hear you, you're still talking like if somebody came into your office and they got a problem. I'm talking about the ones who don't show up. I'm talking to ones who don't show up. I'm talking about the people who think the Nile is a river in Egypt. They don't know they're doing it. I'm talking about my brother who loves to be sarcastic, and his son says that's what he does, and he doesn't know he shouldn't be doing it. And then if I bring it up to him, which I did, he won't talk to me anymore. It's like, why do you keep doing it to me? And you shouldn't be talking to me like that. Finally, after a lot of time, I finally was able to say something to him about him, but he shuts down the way my mother did. It's that narcissism, criticism, and it's a narcissistic injury to him, and he won't look. Even he's got a nice self-aware partner, and she can't get him to do it. There is a tremendous resistance to self-reflection, to looking at the world the way you're talking about, just looking at themselves in their shadows, because the narcissism says they're just right. Everything is just the way it is. So that's what I'm looking at. And it starts with like the collective human organism saying, I have a problem, like an alcoholic. I have a problem. I am greedy, and I want to exploit the world for my benefit. And I know that's something I need to change, just like I'm an alcoholic and I've got to change. We're drunk on our own power, and that's got to be said, and then by the people. So how do you get them so that they want to go to therapy, is the kind of like what we're talking about here. But we'll leave.
One more comment though. That's so good. I love the way you brought that in, because it really does apply. And it's kind of like, enabling. Many of us might enable, these behaviors. We might turn a blind eye because it's just easier, because that person has power. So changing the way we relate to these power dynamics, and also changing our value system. I mean, in a way, this past, administration and the language and the antics, it's the perfect representation. It's a perfect mirror for us. And so are we in a place where we're moving beyond that, where we're no longer going to be saying, wow, this person is a great leader with, these qualities. Maybe it's going to be someone who is more giving, more empathetic, more, self-sacrificing in some ways, less narcissistic, because I think that gets boring, it gets tiring. It's not fun to be around someone who's just narcissistic all the time.
Trump is loved for it, and that's the problem, because he's doing what a lot of other people want to be able to do. But we can leave that.
Okay.
We can leave that that part of it. And what I'm trying to say to people who will listen to me about my book is that buying this book is not only for your benefit, so that you can see how coincidences can be helpful to you, but it's a political statement. It's saying to the current worldview which science holds that you're not thinking about this right anymore, that these ideas here are telling you that we have to change our view of the world. It isn't the way you think it is. And coincidences help us see the newer way. Well, Christine, thank you for a really wonderful conversation. I mean, you and I haven't really had a chance to yap like this, where it was mostly about me, you taking pictures of me. And I've seen you around the cafe, but you're really good at talking this stuff. And your Native American connections, I'm so glad to hear, because they're getting you out to the way we need to think about it. And we need to put Native American kind of thinking together with technological and blend them, because the technology can be useful, and figuring out like this can be a way of doing it. But well, another time somehow, I want to see your movie. I want to see what you do with it. And somehow we're going to have to do something together again, because you've got the right ideas for me. And I don't know what the Coincidence Project is going to put on seminars. Well, I'll let you know. I'll see what you're available to be able to do. But meanwhile, I thank you very much for being on the show, and you're a delight.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. And thank you for inviting me to your Coincidence Project. I'm just thrilled to be a part of that too.
You're welcome.
So, all right, take care. Have a good weekend.
And stay well.
You as well.
This psychosphere is our mental atmosphere, like a hologram of cosmic consciousness.